Welcome back to Control Alt Deliberate, where we talk with people actually solving the hard problems in tech, not just talking about them. Today I'm joined by Andrew McNicol, CTO and co-founder of BreakPoint Labs, a security firm that's spent the last decade on the sharp end of offensive and defensive security. Andrew's journey runs all the way back from Geek Squad in college to working with law enforcement and counterintelligence, hunting bad actors, to building a DoD-accredited red team that's hacked everything from military networks to critical infrastructure, all with the goal of making us safer. Andrew, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, John.
And congrats. I think it's 10 years, right? How's that feel?
Yeah, thank you. It flew by. I am knocking on the door for you about as hard as you can knock, my friend. I'm months away, and I don't feel that old, but definitely that when we hit that 10-year mark, I'm like, how old am I?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm getting there.
Oh, I hate to give you the spoiler alert, but when you hit 50, a year feels like a week. So yeah,
Yeah, it's all relative,
like,
right? You've got more time to be. Yeah, it's all relative to how long you've been when you were like two. A week is a big part of your life, but yeah.
yeah, a week felt like 7 years, right? Like I remember even trying to get my license. That was the worst 6 months of my life. Anyhow, let's rewind a little bit. You kind of share with me, but I'd love for you to share like how you fell into security. You mentioned the path of Blockbuster and even Geek Squad back in the day, but don't go too deep. So we're here for 6 minutes, but give us an idea of where this whole thing started.
Yeah, I had an affinity for technology at an early age, so I was always into that. I didn't know I was going to be. I knew if you'd asked me when I was a little kid, you would have gotten two answers. Would have been world wrestling, right? Like professional wrestling would have been an answer in middle school, and then it was like technology. I knew it was computers. Then I said, do something with computers. I got started in Geek Squad, as you mentioned, and that kind of dealt with security, which is ironic. You wouldn't think so, but my entire job was just getting malware off computers. And at the time, you just thought as low-level tech work. But as I matured in my career, those skills actually were like, oh, there's a pretty big overlap here, right? Like if you're dealing with malware, right, is a big part of a security job. But really sparked my interest was when I left Geek Squad. I worked for an IT company that was kind of managed services and virtual desktop infrastructure. And there was a security engineer who I'm actually still good friends with, my buddy Matt. And he showed me MS08067, right? The SMB exploit that was baked into Metasploit. And he showed me with the VNC inject payload. And I saw him hit enter on a command and get a pull up the visual GUI VNC injection of another computer on the network. And now from that I was like, this is like Harry Potter stuff. I want to do this. This is cool. So I was kind of hooked from that point and kind of shifted into security shortly after that at the Army Research Lab. So I'm not sure that covers a lot of ground, but I'm not sure if there's anything you want me to expand on.
That's good. Well, again, as you're going through that transition, right, and you're actually getting into attacks and counterattacks, et cetera, what would you say to the layman about how attacks actually unfold versus how they probably think it unfold? They see the TV and you click on the keyboard a few times and magically you have access to the entire world. I don't think it's quite like that. So but where would you bridge reality versus fantasy?
Yeah, I'd say it's you definitely hit the nail on the head with the Hollywood approach in thinking of like Matrix and typing on that screen and the terminals going all crazy. I got past the firewall, and yeah, there's always the Hollywood approach that when you're watching the video, the movie, you kind of cringe a little bit. The reality is, hacking is a lot of failure, and then just not giving up, right? So like I think in the Hollywood example you gave, they oversimplify a lot of the first steps, and there's a lot that goes into getting initial access. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot more reconnaissance, depending on if you're doing like a red team mission or a pen test. There's a lot more leadway, and Hollywood fast tracks it and glorifies it. And it's the same for defensive work too. Like when you're catching bad guys, like you're kind of looking at PCAP all day.
Yeah.
In a dark windowless room where you didn't need glasses before you started that job, but you need them now.
Yeah.
I don't know why we didn't use the lights. But
we like to read.
You're looking at PCAP all day, so it's not as it definitely, you got to really love the work you're doing. And I think that security is one of those like jobs where to be good at it, you probably really got to love it, because at the end of the day, if you're looking at the defensive or offensive side, going through a ton of data,
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm scoped at like targeting, a network that scales the entire country. So we're talking about like millions of hosts, and like going through that amount of data is, you got to love what you're doing.
Yeah, and be a great analyst. So I get that. And I know for the most part, you're the tip of the spear for your teams. What's it like being the guy in the room who pretty much has to manage, dictate what's going on, delegate things to make sure things are getting going? I mean, basically, you're juggling it all.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I'll speak from an offensive perspective. It's true too for defensive as well. It's the idea of you need someone that's kind of pointing the team on what holes to dig. There's a million places you could look at and research, and it can be overwhelming. From somebody that's new, you either may not know where to start, or there's so many paths to go down, you couldn't possibly go down them all. So you do need like sort of a ringleader that's saying, hey, calling the shots and sort of like directing people, look into this. Hey, do OSINT here, do recon here.
Yep.
Has anybody pulled the data for this? Have we looked at the shares yet? Have we looked at the website, at the internal apps? Someone that's kind of like taking a step back, looking at the high level, dividing out the work amongst the team, and then, keeping track of that. So you're not having like, especially on a red team, you're not having 2 or 3 engineers do the same thing, because that's going to increase your chances of getting caught. So and also making those smart decisions on, is the juice worth the squeeze? This is a big thing on the red team. On the pen test side, it's not so, you don't worry about it. You can be loud and detection's not a thing, but it's really critical on the red team side, because you might be able to see a path, get to a box, get to certain data, and you have to really understand, like, okay, how are we going to take that path? Is it OPSEC safe? Are we following? Are we going to our access blown? Making sure we've got like 3 ways dug into that network if we're taking something risky. So it's good to have that sort of person that's helping people understand where to spend their time. And in defensive side too, because you're looking through PCAP forever, and like, it's a daunting task to pull bad guys out of the network that may or may not be there. And it's kind of like, how do you keep your guys motivated and engaged to keep looking? And that's a big part of the job for the defensive job, I'd say.
Yeah, since I've only ever been on that side, it is a lot of false positives, a lot of shadows you start jumping at that aren't really things. So I get that. So obviously, going into BreakPoint, at some point in time, between watching things like Chopper and Heartbleed rip through environments, it seems like you had that moment where you're like, okay, we can't keep being on our heels and reacting to things. I want to get proactive. You talk a little bit about, that and how BreakPoint Labs started.
Yeah. So I when I was at the Army Research Lab, that's where I did my incident response work. I kind of started out there doing, their Tenable Nessus deployment for the DoD. I was part of the pilot program there and kind of led that out for the Army. And then I, very quickly, like, running vuln scanners is only so difficult. And I kind of like mastered that and wanted to do something else. I got into the incident response world, which is a lot harder. And it was certainly a lot of fun, and sort of did the high level incidents, working with law enforcement, counterintelligence there, and that kind of, which was very fun work. Right around the time you had mentioned, like, the Chopper, malware, Heartbleed, these like large things, we were seeing nation state actors take over large pools of technology, Chopper being cold fusion focused. I kept seeing, okay, I see that I'm going through PCAP here. I see they are querying for these 3 resources. If they're there, then they're pushing, an exploit that's deploying their malware. I was like, why don't I just go out there, write a script to just query these resources across all of our infrastructure so we can get ahead of the game? And I got the green light to do that. And what that ended up doing was birthing our we called it the web assessment team there, which was a proactive approach for external. So really it was just like everything touching the internet, but it was for a multi-million IP space for a network that spanned the globe. So it was a big, right? So we're talking huge coverage. And we led that effort. I was still a contractor there working for Parsons. And I had taken over a pretty major through a flaw. I remember it was a 0-day web application flaw. I took over a missile range, and I'll be honest. When I did that, I was pretty proud. I was like, "This is awesome!" And I went to my management there, leadership there, and they didn't understand it because it wasn't an IAVA, a DoD Information Assurance Vulnerability Alert. And I was like, "Guys, it's an O-day. Like I found it, and it's taken over a pretty critical asset."
Yeah.
And when they didn't, that's what inspired me to like go out and do my own thing. Cause I was like, I want to have a bigger impact. There were a couple other instances where I found like a flaw written in like a contact us page that allowed me to send email through that contact us page. And then through Google hacking, I found that same code had been deployed across like all the DoD. And I reported the call up, and I was like, I can have a bigger impact than what I can do here at this contractor position. I just got to take the leap of faith.
Yeah.
And that's where BPL came into the picture of like, we kind of wanted to break the mold of sort of what you see in the DoD contracting space, which is like a focus on getting the contractors, these big contractors have a focus on getting people in the seat to bill, catching their money, and then they're worried about quality thereafter. And I was kind of like, for me, the most important thing is delivering quality. Like, I would rather not do the work if I can't do it right. So that's what we call it, break the cycle, where we're trying to basically deliver that impactful mission critical systems, right? So impactful impact. So we're that's what the goal is at BreakPoint Labs, to break the cycle.
Thanks for doing that, because again, I've seen even on the more mundane, it's like, let's get this concrete contract at $200K, and then we'll be able to overbill it and all these other crazy things. I'm glad somebody out there is more like me. It's like, hey, if I can provide value, the money's going to come, and I'm here to provide the value, not make the money. That's just like a ancillary thing. So thanks for taking that on, especially given we need that in our government a little bit more.
There's a lot of pride. Like, guess it's definitely a big pride thing, right? Like, I couldn't be happy with myself if I weren't like proud of the work that I'm performing, even if it made money. I wouldn't like. I would rather be, make less money, but be very proud of the work that I'm performing. That's a better value add to me.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that. It'll be a good segue in a little bit. A couple questions. So, again, obviously, stay high level, so we're not giving up either your secret sauce or any of the secrets. But for people who don't interact in the DoD world, what is that kind of day to day, or what does that look like at a high level?
Yeah, it's working for I guess the Department of War now, DoD. Like it's they have a very strong focus on security. There's no doubt about that. There is a huge budget and focus around security. I think just the big difference between working in DoD and commercial is things can move at different paces, right? So I do both markets now. In commercial, you move pretty fast. And in the DoD, there's a little more steps that go through with contracting and making sure that, everything's ducks in a row before you start. A lot more red tape. And the assessments move slower. So my guys that work solely in the DoD space, when you have somebody that's like sort of a big security geek, the kind of guys I try to hire, they want to be leveraged, right? They don't want idle hands.
Right.
So actually, if I just fed them off of the DoD work, they would be probably bored and looking for something else, because it does move slower. I think that's no surprise to anybody hearing that, right? It's the government, that's kind of they go at their pace. It is what it is. There's a lot of reasons for that. And in the commercial space is a lot faster. So I let them work on commercial projects as it comes up. It kind of keeps them engaged in between those gaps. They always have the main priority is their DoD customer. And they have the opportunity to support things like after hours, or if there's downtime, they get involved. And it's pretty mutually beneficial, because we bring that experience over to the government. So they're kind of constantly getting, we're staying up to date on like, the latest and greatest, because I've got environments that I stay in 24/7, 365 in the commercial space, always banging on them. So right. When the new comes out, we analyze it commercial, and we can bring that intel over on our DoD side.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, obviously, sharpen the saw is always a great tactic, and it's that answer is kind of one of my next question was like NASA does a lot of things where they try to bring their technology out. It's cool that you're almost reversing that, taking private sector knowledge and experience back to the government, so that you're basically bringing your value to all the entities, regardless of
Yeah,
what.
and we do it too, right? So the DoD did teach from an offensive side. The DoD did teach super cool, low level offensive work that you don't see non DoD red teams do.
Right?
The amount of connecting systems and tunneling through SSH tunnels, like we will tunnel from I'll be from my computer here, my laptop here, and I will tunnel like 11 SSH tunnels together
Yeah.
to get to somewhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And you don't see that kind of happen in the commercial space. In the DoD, they do a lot of really cool. It's not new, but it's like tradecraft that is like pretty cool. That the tunneling stuff, and we bring that into the commercial world too. So like in terms of the cutting edge, like finding the latest vulnerability, commercial world brings that back to DoD, and then DoD brings all that tradecraft for like avoiding detection and really stress testing those controls.
Yeah.
That in the commercial space there's less maturity on.
Yeah, it's great. And I mean, I think you alluded to this a little bit, but one of the things that stood out is you're almost 100% retention. So I'm sure part of that's the, staying in different areas and, get exciting, make sure people are fulfilled. But
yeah, so we have 100% retention rate for all the people that are doing like pen testing and red teaming at BreakPoint Labs. So basically my team, I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah,
I think
great.
I don't know of anybody else that's got like 100% retention over 10-year plus period. So no one's left. And I think big part of that is like, yes, my job is to do some of this hacking work and to grow the business and all these other things. But one of the core things that I put above all else is I put myself in their shoes and say, what do they value? And I make sure that I understand if there's any challenges, like how can I fix that? My job is to fix that challenge or open the door for them.
Yeah.
First and foremost. So I think that's like, do you want to call that servant leadership? I'm not sure of the term. I'm not like, I don't study leadership books and stuff like that, but just treating people right and making sure like, hey, they're engaged, they're getting what they need for their career. I was like them. I know I understand, and building the right culture of like continuous learning. And we're all remote. So we don't have a physical location. We're all working remotely and we stay in video chat all day.
Right.
So for that 8-hour day, we're in video chat. You can turn your camera off, but it gives you virtual cubicle style.
Yeah.
I think if we didn't have that and we just had like Slack chat, people would probably drift away and have gone. But we're like kind of, we're still doing the banter, talking about what video games we're playing. I just beat Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment with my 7-year-old dauher. We share those details with each other, right? So it's more personable. And I think that's a big part of it too, is we're not just like a username in a Slack.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, look, just keeping a job for 10 years is impressive, but given the burnout and churn in our industry, certainly I would imagine yours with the glassy-eyed stare of PCAPs and everything else, it's impressive. But let's
I've been burned out a few times.
That was one of my question is, how do you avoid that? Because you kind of shared in our first call that you get a little obsessive and hit your objective. How do you balance that intensity without burning yourself out? And then obviously, how's that go to even your people to make sure that they're still taken care of? And then look, I've seen it, right? It's like there is that fulfillment of solving the problem that's like the gold. But when you're driving home at 3:45, bleary-eyed, sometimes I don't know if to your point about the juice is worth the squeeze, but tell me a little bit of how you manage that for yourself and then your team.
Yeah, so you're right. I think security is one of those fields, both sides of the fence, defense and offense. Burnout is incredibly high. And I got some advice from a colleague of mine, like not too long ago, a guy named Dan, really sharp guy. He basically said, you want to do everything you can to avoid a burnout, because once you've burned out, digging out of that hole is way harder than avoiding it.
Yeah.
Because that was like, so I'd already gotten burned out once. I started the company and I was, working and just, it was still like, I started BPL when I was, 28. So I'm a young man. I was, I got married that same year. My life was starting, right? Like
Yeah.
I was just running at everything 100 miles an hour as fast as I could run. And now I can appreciate that, yes, work's important, but it's also important to respect that burnout prevention and doing things like, you know what, if it's Friday and you don't got a lot going on, like bump out early, guys. Like little things like that go a long way. And I also have a policy where unlimited PTO with my guys, basically my core guys. And it's like, if they need off, you always have off. There's never, and I will, if you don't take time off, I go to them and say, hey man, like you should take some time. Like I understand you're, you don't want it, but you don't need it. But like, coming from an older guy who's been down this road, you want to take some time, go do something, go hike. They always say go touch grass, but go do some hiking, go do something, right? That's huge. So we put a lot of focus on work hard, play hard. After we have a big project, if we know we kind of like burn the wick a little low, right? I will adjust operations to make sure like, hey, we're let's, and we do communicate that with our customers too. So like our DoD customers, we can't always dictate the schedule. It's coming from them, but they know just from like working with them over 10 years and building the team, like, hey, if we have like a hardcore mission, come back and those guys get some downtime, some lab time that's built in our softs. So like they then get lab time, chill time, and another portion of the team goes out to the next mission. So they're not constantly shifting, because I think that happens a lot, especially with teams that require travel assessments back to back. Like that happens too often and they get just totally burned out. So
yeah, it's good. When I got, God willing, I think that if anybody, the military understands, you can't just have deployment after deployment, in a sub, you got to give them the downtime to recharge and recover. I also think it opens up clarity, right? When you can step out, to your point, touch grass.
And we're a little softer too than military folk, right? So like sometimes you get the military leader leading the contractors the same way they lead boot camp. And as the leader for those engineers, you just have to let them know like, hey, like understand, like they're a drill sergeant, they're just take that with a grain of salt. They're a little, they're not coming from the same environment. You've got these computer geeky guys and being led at the government side by a drill sergeant. It doesn't always match up. Yeah. So that's where your leader comes into play, like myself here in BPL, and I kind of like smooth it over, and they got to understand, like it is what it is. Working for the Department of War, you kind of
Still, to not bring the analogy too fine is you got to give them air cover. So I love that you take care of that for them. All right, so let's cast the net out a little bit. 2-3 years, obviously we'll save one question for AI because that's always part of this. But
yeah.
Basically, from where you sit, what's actually changing in the threat landscape versus, just noise or hype?
Well, that's a good question. It's hard to ignore AI. We know that's a massive part. And I almost, here's the thing. I'm a guy that back in the day when Bitcoin was under $1, I said, don't buy it, that's dumb. So ever since then, I no longer trust my forward thinking self. Right? Because I'm like, oh my gosh, like
who would ever do this?
I worked with a guy who was basically trying to get me into Bitcoin, and I was like, nah, it's stupid. And he was buying pizza with Bitcoin, which was stupid.
Yeah, right.
So it is what it is. But man, it's hard to forward think. So I think we know AI is going to change the game. To what extent is I think up to guesswork now. What we see AI being leveraged now is really lowering the footprint of complexity. Like, we have people that couldn't code before, but now can code because AI can spit it out. And that makes a big difference, because one of the things I always said that makes you dangerous as a hacker is if you can do some coding. If you can do a little bit of scripting, you're dangerous as a hacker because you're not relying on these pre-canned things. So now you've better armed everybody, right? Because now everybody can code. If they can use AI, you can get a script. It's pretty remarkable, right? It's not perfect, but it can get you 98% there, and you can smooth it over the rest of it. So it's definitely lowering the bar on that front. The other thing I think it's going to do is it's going to make, I was talking with a colleague of mine about this the other day. It's going to, he brought this idea to me, but I resonated with it. It's the idea that, threat actors generally are going to want to spend their time on stuff that's going to yield output. And he had the idea of like oil fracking. It was the beginning of that was like difficult to do because it was so time consuming. So they just didn't do it. But then as technology improved, oil fracking became a main way to extract oil. Same kind of thing with AI here. Low level mom and pop shops aren't really worth their time. But now with AI, they can automate a lot of that, and they may go after all those low hanging fruit, right? The fracking example, and start to hit these other places that have lower security and still extract that value at scale that they couldn't do with AI prior. So I think it's going to shift individuals who their threat targets are, right? So like as you analyze a target, you're like saying, okay, what's your threat profile? Who's your realistic attacker? If it's a mom and pop cookie shop, well, who's going to care about them?
Yeah, right.
You've got your opportunistic people looking for financial gain. I think that's going to become a much bigger factor. And I think that's going to shift government's focus to help them out because they're not going to have the resources. So I think we're going to see AI make that shift in the next couple of years to really hit places that only make sense to hit at scale. And those places don't have the help that they need. They don't have the expertise. They have no idea what they're doing. They're struggling to there's 5 people that work there. I think that's going to be a pretty big shift to focus. Also, obviously, lowering the bar in general for them going up against the bigger targets.
Right.
As it shifts the workforce, that's a whole different thing, right? Like some jobs are going to disappear and other jobs are going to pop up. I think that's going to have a pretty drastic impact. I think it's kind of funny now because one of the things that AI has done in the last 2025 is I find myself having to de-AI things often, right? So I'm either de-AI in code or a blog post or something. I find myself it's who would have thought in 2025 I am taking something AI generated and having to de-AI it. Because you read something that sounds like AI, you can just smell it. You can't put it out. You could you just know it looks and smells like AI. This can't work. That's going to be a job. People are going to have to de-AI stuff.
Turn it back into human language, et cetera.
Yeah, because I know ChatGPT wrote that. How often can you read an email and say, I know that's ChatGPT, right? I know and then you don't care about it. So if you're trying to build an effective marketing strategy, you don't want to use a communication that looks like AI because
exactly. You're dead in the water. People, you turn them off. All right, last question. One of the things that really struck me when we had our first chat too was you were talking about some of the biggest gaps being detection. Organizations have tools, but they're not really tuned to catch, bad actors or real attacks. What are 1 or 2 fundamentals you wish every defender would get right before they buy their next shiny box or, check the box by buying something, put it in place, but they don't really actually have it set up correctly, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say, and this might be a different answer than I gave you, when we last spoke. I can't recall exactly what I said there, but there's 2 main areas that give me the most success when I come up against an organization, and they can have every blinky box in the world, and it doesn't make a difference usually. The first is understanding, okay, and this is a general thought question for that person. How does a user get to my system? So this is a very general question. Right? We've got VPN, email, what are my external services that I allow things in? And then how do we control that? So how are those password resets done? Most of the time, I get in through this way. Most of the time, I am using a password reset process, whether it's automated through technology, like answering secret questions, guessing them, or calling up the help desk and pretending I'm Bob in accounting. And, ask yourself this, when you reset your passwords before, what have you had to provide? Usually confidence and the name. That's it. If you're like, hey, and a sense of urgency. Yeah. If you're just like, oh man, I've locked my account. I'm Bob from accounting. I got to get in. Can you reset it? Okay. I'll put it back to the default. What's the default? Yeah. It works. I don't want to say every time, but I'm starting to feel a lot. Yeah, so understanding that, and that's not buying a block box, right? That's understanding a technical process, understanding how do people reset passwords? How am I allowing people in the network? Are we requiring 2-factor across the board? And even then, how does that 2-factor work? Because by the way, I get past 2-factor all the time. I call and say, guess what? I dropped my phone. My phone broke. I need a new phone, bro. What do I do? Create the urgency, have a little bit of recon on the user. Need a new phone. They're going to text me a link. And I'm going to set up the new 2-factor. Right? So those kind of questions. And then the second thing is moving on the inside. I have yet to be on a network in my 15 years plus of whatever's touching networks and assessing them at this level, where Active Directory was not an entire rat's nest. So Active Directory is probably, I would say, some of the single most largest area of risk for any network. There's no surprise. Obviously, it's a needed thing. It's not necessarily bad inherently, but after 10 years plus of use, the permissions that just get cascaded throughout are dirty. One of the networks I was on recently, the domain users group, a built-in group, had generic all to a service account that was disabled. Well, when you talk to an admin, they're saying, well, it's disabled. What's the risk? Okay, well, generic all lets me enable it.
Right.
So the risk is there, right? And I showed them. I turned it on. Well, you don't know the password. Generic all lets me change the password. Change the password. Now I'm that service account. That service account can change a DA's password. So I'm now a DA. I take over the network, all from a permission thing that had been there for over a decade.
Yeah.
And I see that all the time. So like people just don't, like they'll buy this blinky box to do something, but they aren't evaluating some of the core like default credentials on shares that are, shouldn't be there. So really just running Bloodhound and having someone that knows how to look through Bloodhound data, huge. Running Snaffler, which is a free tool to do your share analysis, huge. And then doing that like thought process, that tabletop exercise of how users get access to your system externally and how their password reset happens, huge value add, because these are ways that are always successful for me, and they don't require you to buy a new product. They require you to like change a process, do some training, or do some analysis within Active Directory. But yeah, those are the two answers I'd say, because that's kind of like, if you asked me to break into a major place tomorrow, I would lean on that. I don't usually break in through phishing anymore. I don't need to. I just usually go through I would the phone call phishing or just abusing their password reset procedures.
Yeah, just abusing, unfortunately, myopic processes. So,
and I guess that speaks to your earlier question too, like what hacking looks like. A lot of times you think hacking looks like that, matrix screen, when sometimes it's just guessing the secret questions to your password reset procedure.
Yeah,
and that could be what it looks like. And a lot of times those procedures, more times than not, I've seen them where I just can take thousands and thousands of guesses without being reprimanded. And if they have multiple questions, I see them for whatever reason tell me which question was right, which question was wrong, so I can just guess and snipe them one at a time versus the correct combination. And again, it's like that was not designed with security in mind. That was designed with usability in mind. And it's one of those things like looking at your tech stack, how they get in, how you're allowing people in, and evaluating with security in mind. I think those user password resets are heavily usability tested, but not heavily security tested.
That's awesome. So if anybody's watching this and you want to go from checking boxes to getting shit fixed, Andrew's your guy. What's the best way for them to reach out?
Info@breakpointlabs.com would get to me. I'm also A McNicol at BreakPoint Labs. You can reach me at LinkedIn as well. Happy to help. And that's that is our kind of thing, is I don't use a vuln scanner when we do any pen testing or hacking. So my job is to find the stuff that vuln scanner is not reporting.
Yeah, great. And we'll put all that down in the bios. Andrew, thanks for your time. Love talking to somebody who's clearly an expert and has passion to deliver value, not just get paid. So thanks for your time, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks, John, for having me. Appreciate it.